Yes, okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Brooke. I'm the Deputy CEO of the Asia for Animals Coalition and the lead coordinator of AfA's working group focused on macaques, the Macaque Coalition, or MAC for short. Today, I'll give you an overview of who macaques are, the issues that they face, both locally and globally, and why we should make an effort on their behalves, which is something that the AfA Macaque Coalition can help with. Some of you already have an in-depth knowledge about macaques, the different issues that they face, but others may not be as familiar with them or with the specific challenges that the different species face or the immensity of the challenges that they face across the world. I do know that many, or maybe all of you who work in wild animal protection have probably run across situations involving macaques that you'd really like to have helped with. So this talk is designed as an overview of all of these things and as a starting point for understanding what the Macaque Coalition is, why it exists, and how we can potentially help, and how you can get involved. So there are about 25 species of macaque. They share certain anatomical and behavioral similarities, but there are differences too between species. For example, some have stricter or looser social hierarchies. There are big differences in size. Some of them prefer quite different habitats, and some of them, their ability to adapt with change varies quite a bit between species, which is quite important. All but one macaque species are native to Asia. They naturally inhabit much of Asia, ranging from as far west as Afghanistan and Pakistan, up through the Japanese islands, through most of the Japanese islands, and south throughout Indonesia, India, Sri Lanka. There are also introduced populations outside of these ranges, for example, in the United States and in Mauritius. In much of their range, macaques are historically and culturally really important to the people that live around them. They feature in mythology, in music, in art, and in everyday life. Some have coexisted for millennia alongside human beings, and some have been exploited for just about as long. In today's global society, and in the face of so much human pressure, even traditional exploitation is not sustainable, in addition to causing extreme suffering to the individuals involved. The habitats that macaques prefer really can't be generalized. Some naturally face cold, wintry conditions through part of each year, and some are completely tropical. Oh, I'm not switching slides, am I? There we go. Apologies. Some have trouble even just surviving when their habitats are altered or destroyed, and we call these the specialist species. Other macaque species are incredibly adaptable. They find ways to survive, which can be both a blessing and a curse. These are the generalist species, who we most often see directly persecuted, abused, and exploited in really huge numbers. Macaques are exceptionally intelligent, social, emotional beings. They have evolved to navigate large, complex social groups. They form strong, lasting bonds and friendships with each other, and they clearly express a range of emotions that are really familiar to us as humans, ranging from joy, frustration, fear, and everything in between. Every single one of them is an individual, just like you, just like me, just like the cats and dogs with whom we often share our homes and we get to know and love so well. They can be shy, they can be bold, they can be exuberant, they can be very serious. Some clearly display fully developed senses of humor, of fun. So when they're framed as pests or marauders or invaders, which is often the case both where we have introduced them and where they naturally occur, even when their attempts to survive truly do put human survival at risk or make it more difficult, we need to keep in mind that every macaque is an individual with their own interest in pursuing a good life and whose well-being is completely dependent on the way we perceive them and the way we relate to them. As with the rest of the world, habitat loss and degradation has already been significant and is increasing, accelerating across Asia. This can lead whole species towards extinction. When huge areas of habitat are converted into agriculture or otherwise developed, how are the resident macaques supposed to survive? Some of them don't. They might just die out or go someplace else, or alternately, they will adapt and they'll eat what's available to them, especially if it's very easily available. When this happens, it can affect human livelihoods, and it can really compromise some people's ability to survive and to feed themselves and their families, and this can't be ignored. This is really serious. When this happens, in return, monkeys are then persecuted in a whole variety of ways and in huge numbers. This is also important. Lion-tailed macaques, who are a specialist species, thrive normally in the primary tropical evergreen rainforests of India's Western Ghats. Habitat fragmentation and degradation for agriculture is a major threat to their survival, as is hunting. These endangered macaques have recently started feeding on crops, which is a new behavior for them. Apparently, they have no other choice. We don't really know yet in this situation, which is really life or death for them, they can fully adapt or adapt well to this forced change in diet and behavior. But we might, in fact, never find out, because in retaliation for the hardships that they're causing to people as they try to survive, their entire species is being edged closer to extinction. Similarly, the toque macaques of Sri Lanka, they're generalists. They're fairly good at adapting to changes to their environment, within reason, of course. They're also endangered, with one subspecies critically endangered. Yet recently there was a proposal to remove thousands of them from the wild and send them to China, partially as a means to solve issues caused by negative interactions between humans and macaques in what are now agricultural landscapes. Some of you here today supported a recent appeal to Sri Lanka's government on this issue, which was thankfully successful, and the proposal has been rejected. So different cultures have had really different relationships with macaques over time. They've been seen as sources of food and medicine. They've been seen as tricksters, as friends, as gods, as pests. So of course the way people interact with them in different areas really varies. But sadly, even when they're most revered, close contact with people can put them at very serious risk. So the details differ between locations. For example, the specifics of human-macaque relations in Nepal, Hong Kong, southern India, and Bali, each of these are unique. And there are also profound differences between feeding monkeys for religious reasons, or as tourists, or for any other reason, but there are some fundamentals that you just can't get around. Monkeys fed by humans become comfortable around humans, and when that happens, problems are almost certainly going to arise. Macaques are powerful wild animals. When that happens, somebody has to pay the price, whether that's the child who's injured, or whether that is a huge number of monkeys who are killed or persecuted in retaliation. It's really always about food. Other forms of interactions between wild macaques and humans revolve around rubbish dumps or bins in urban areas, or around crops in agricultural areas. Sometimes they're blamed for agricultural damage that's been inflicted by less visible species, but again, sometimes they really do damage crops and cause genuine hardship for people. As a result, they're regularly killed in huge numbers or rounded up and sold to the biomedical industry. It's really difficult to quantify exactly how many. In 2022, we released the Macaque report, Indonesia's Unprotected Primates, and this contains an appendix that compiles various reports of such killings across Indonesia. We had a volunteer searching for all of the articles that she could find on this. So of course, there's no reason to think that all of these instances are reported, and there's no reason to think that our volunteer found every single report that's out there. But even with the reports we do have, we can't put a number on it because numbers are often not included. There's no central record kept of any of this. So you get the idea. So macaques, are they and any other animals trying to survive in the remnants and the wreckage of what was once their natural habitat? Are these pests, or are they, just like us, just looking for a way to survive? Coexistence is the goal, but we have a whole lot of work to do. Most macaque species are at least occasionally exploited by people, either by those who have long lived alongside them or by people from far across the globe. In some places, they're caught and their body parts are used as meat, as medicine, as decoration, or in ritual. For some macaque species, this isn't necessarily the biggest threat, but it does affect all of them. It's pretty common, and it does actually form the primary threat for some species like the Sulawesi macaque or yaki. Macaque Coalition member Selamat Yaki works specifically to protect this species in their really small range. Another threat that many macaques face, from specialists with tiny ranges to generalists with big ranges like long-tailed macaques, is capture for the pet trade. The legality of capturing and keeping macaques as pets, or as display animals outside hotels or shops varies a lot, but the practice is common around the whole world, and it's incredibly detrimental to the individuals and populations that are involved. When it is regulated, enforcement is usually very poor. Similarly, both inside and outside their natural ranges, the photo prop and entertainment trades exploit untold numbers of macaques, often wild caught. But whether they're caught in the wild or born in captivity, all of these animals, the way being used like this really causes them all to suffer, and the practices promote the capture of even more animals to keep the trade going. Longtime AfA Coalition and Macaque Coalition member Jakarta Animal Aid Network and others too are working really hard to see an end to practices like topeng monyet, dancing street monkeys, which use brutal training techniques and which condemn macaques to live lives of nothing but suffering. Topeng monyet is a somewhat localized practice, but the exploitation of primates as actors or entertainers is completely global. This leads perfectly into the work of another AfA working group, the Social Media Animal Cruelty Coalition, or SMAC. The majority of content that SMAC sees is primate-related, and it's usually macaques. Content is uploaded to garner viewer engagement, to entertain, sometimes to make money. It ranges from content depicting unintentional, ambiguous abuse of macaques, so for example, pet owners who really don't understand the harm that they're doing, and it goes all the way up towards really clearly intentional physical and sadistic violence. Globally, immense numbers of macaques are used in biomedical research and testing. Between 2010 and 2019, just a dozen countries, most of them European and North American countries, imported nearly 500,000 live long-tailed macaques, according to the CITES trade database. They were mostly used for research and testing, and demand has risen really sharply since then. Long-tailed macaques are being completely gobbled up by the biomedical industry. It's clear that there's a lot of international illegal activity going on here. Just last year, a number of Cambodian officials and their co-conspirators were indicted by the US Department of Justice for smuggling long-tailed macaques, passing them off as purpose-bred individuals, and they remain under investigation. It looks as though this was far from a one-off occurrence, and Cambodia is a major supplier of long-tailed macaques to the United States biomedical industry. There are strong suspicions that similar laundering goes on in other places too, with the number of utilized individuals far exceeding the breeding capacity of the centers in which they are supposedly bred. Whatever their origins, every single one of them is an individual, and every single one of them is removed from their family and subjected to terrifying, traumatizing situations. Beyond that, the dubious origins of so many of these monkeys puts human safety at serious risk because of the disease risk involved. Before long-tailed macaques were the biomedical industry's primate of choice, it was rhesus macaques until India banned their export in the 1970s. However, habitat loss continues and negative interactions between macaques and people continue, and they've recently lost some of their legal protections. A lot of people worry that, once again, rhesus macaques will become a primary focus of the biomedical industry for research purposes. About 80% of macaque species are threatened with extinction, even those that can be locally hyperabundant. Long-tailed macaques, again, are the perfect example. I can't actually see that. does it say 10 minutes? 5 minutes, oh dear, okay. They were least concerned until 2020 when they were brought up to vulnerable and then quickly to endangered in 2022 based on the scale of the threats that they're facing today and current trends. So not surprisingly, the biomedical industry is formally challenging this uplisting, which theoretically it doesn't threaten anything that they do because theoretically they only use captive bred monkeys. But it's interesting to see how threatened they really are by this species' endangered status. They're fighting it very hard. It's important not to lose sight of the individual when you're talking about conservation status, uplistings, formal petitions, species differences, or any of this. But it's also vitally important to remember that conservation and welfare are really intertwined. You just can't have one without the other. Individuals suffer when populations suffer, and populations suffer when individuals are compromised. In the same spirit that the AfA coalition brings together organizations who may differ on the details, but who share overarching goals relating to animal welfare, advocacy, and justice, conservationists and animal advocates and activists really need to communicate and listen and collaborate, and encouraging this is part of MAC's strategy. How we talk about macaques really matters. Sensationalist headlines, demonization, and constant bad press shapes attitudes. Troops of monkeys are referred to as brawling gangs, a menace, pitted in battle against humans. It's little wonder they can easily be viewed as a faceless horde, not as groups of individuals trying to survive. I can't see that either. Oh, glasses. 3 minutes, excellent, thank you. This is not at all to say that stories about negative interactions should be ignored or not reported, but it's to say that we all need to try to shift the narrative so that it is correctly framed as a situation that's complex and requires thoughtful, informed action. A recent spate of articles in the popular press has framed efforts to protect macaques as anti-science, anti-patient, and needless. You can see this article here by the president of the US National Association for Biomedical Research that says activists are trying to slow down life-saving research. It says that there's nothing at all wrong with being an activist, but in fact the people who assessed the long-tail macaques for the IUCN resulting in the endangered status are also very well respected and established primatologists, conservation biologists, and species specialists, and they're not working to slow down life-saving research. I'm going to skip this slide because I'm running out of time. So just about all of the issues that I've touched on here are interconnected with at least one, usually many other issues. This slide just gives one example, how killing, habitat loss, the biomedical trade, and the pet trade are related to one another. There are many more such relationships, and they all overlap, and they're really difficult to detangle and lay out in a simple-to-see way. Welfare issues and conservation issues are completely intertwined, and it's incredibly important to acknowledge this and to work with this in mind. We need to try to look at it holistically. So, how do we fix all of this? This talk isn't going to provide any answers to that. It's just that what we know is that we need to start by asking the right questions, like how does all of this together affect macaques? How does it affect people? How does it affect all the other living beings with whom we share this planet? Tackling so many issues at once is a really daunting proposal. One of the few clear things is that we need to work together. Multiple approaches are really needed. Detailed long-term research is vital, and so is action and advocacy today. No single person or organization can be an expert in all of the many areas that need to be covered in order to start making a positive change for macaques. As isolated as they might feel, nobody fighting this battle is alone. There are others, and we need to make the time and the space and find the trust that is needed to start making these connections and sharing resources and sharing experience across the world. Okay, so everything I've talked about is why we formed the AfA Macaque Coalition. If you're interested in knowing more about MAC, speak to me after the session or go on our website. And I do encourage everybody to also participate in the survey. There are little cards dotted about here and everywhere in the venue where you can do the QR code here now. As it turns out, I skipped some content because I thought I was running out of time, but I've been given a bit of extra time, so there is time for questions if anybody has any. And I'll have to put on my glasses so I can see you. Ah, there you are. Any questions or comments? Yes, please.
Okay, thank you very much for the presentation. My question is about nowadays, due to the macaque menace, especially in India and Nepal, and the approach has been done to stabilize the population through sterilization and spaying. So, the AfA Coalition Forum, that how does it perceive this approach towards the management of the population? Do you have any ideas on this?
Yeah, just to be sure I understood correctly, you asked about sterilization.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so last year, possibly the year before, we did an online event about sterilization because a lot of people have questions about sterilization. I personally am not an expert in this, but we do have experts in the group, and they gave some really, really useful and interesting insight into sterilization programs. One, there are a lot of them sort of dotted about, but really comprehensive ones with a lot of preliminary research, very comprehensively done, a lot of follow-up research, and ones that are maintained are actually quite rare. The points they made is you really, really need to know the details before you can even begin such an approach. You can't just randomly capture monkeys and sterilize some of them and hope that negative interactions will stop. Negative interactions happen for so many different possible reasons, and it may not just be because there are a lot of them. You need to know which individuals are responsible, why, if there's another way to avert it, or whatever. But also the sterilization programs themselves, they need to be done, they need to target the correct individuals at the correct time intervals, and this needs to be monitored and done in an ongoing way. So this doesn't mean that the approach can never work. And I don't know the details about the approach, the region you're talking about. I don't know that particular program. But what I can say is that I know they need to be approached with great care and caution and invested in with time and resources and expertise and money in order to have any hope of really having them make the intended effect. And also, of course, there are welfare considerations that need to be paid attention to. Yeah?
I have also read some literatures regarding the new approach, like intertesticular injection of calcium chloride and some other chemicals that helps to, atrophy the testicles. But I haven't found any human approach regarding this approach, intertesticular injection. Is there if we can connect regarding this to the expert, then I would be very glad.
Yeah, let's connect afterwards and I can refer you to the people who know a lot more about that than I do.
Yeah, thank you.
Is that okay? Thanks. Any other questions or comments or anything? No? Okay, thank you.
All right, thanks. Thank you so much, Brooke.